A huge hospital, towering on an ominous mountain, is hidden in the darkness of the night. The gray stone structure looks like a curse that hangs over the neighborhood. The doors creak dilapidated, leading to the inner world of the infernal labyrinth. Through the dust and the smell of decaying time, echoes of the past are pounding in my ears, like ghosts that refuse to leave. In the dark corridors, among the burnt walls and abandoned offices, ghosts roam. Their sultans of vanished life have frozen for eternity. The rustling of shadows permeate the air, creating an atmosphere of unknown fear. At night, when the moon is hidden by clouds, their ghostly silhouettes come to life, as if seeking revenge for their torment. When night enveloped the world with its darkness, my friend and I gathered alone. The gray walls of the hospital, which seemed gloomy in the stories, looked only old and abandoned. Mixing the lightness of youth with disbelief, we joked, ignoring the ominous stories. We jumped over a broken fence, made the doors creak open and entered the dark lair of the unknown. My heart was beating faster, but my friend's confidence made me feel safe. We lit the corridors with flashlights, alert to every sound. In the shadow of burnt walls and broken windows, my disbelief began to strengthen. Every glance at the gray structure pierced me with an ominous premonition, which I tried to suppress. I heard a noise, as if the ghost's feet were touching the floor, and my spirit began to tremble. As we continued to explore the abandoned hospital, the atmosphere became increasingly tense. The jokes and lightness of youth disappeared, giving way to caution and anxiety. Every sound, every movement began to cause us anxiety. We moved deeper into the building, lighting the way with flashlights. The shadows of the corridors seemed endless, and the moans of the wind penetrated through the cracked walls like ghosts of forgotten times. My friend continued to walk forward with confidence, which became the only support in this gloomy place. But even his confidence began to erode when we heard a strange sound from above. Noise and grinding, as if something was moving on the roof. We both froze, peering up, our hearts beating wildly in our chests. In the dark, it seemed to us that something was moving, but we could hardly have expected what happened next. Dense darkness hung over us when an incredible fall began from the roof of the hospital. The body, like a puppet, fell down, and the sound of its impact on the ground pierced the entire corridor. We were dumbfounded, trying to realize what had happened. As if at the moment when we were joking about fears, reality mixed with a nightmare. The light of the flashlights illuminated a lifeless face, blood turned red on the walls. The ghost's whispers grew louder, as if they were taking revenge for their suffering. Something inhuman was touching us, and I felt fear permeate me, squeezing my heart. My friend and I were looking at the horror, our eyes locked with the horror that was unfolding before us. The lifeless body lying on the floor began to rise slowly, like a puppet twitching on strings. The shameful light of the lanterns reflected from the lifeless eyes, creating a macabre spectacle. We tried to retreat, but an unknown force held us in place. The whispers of the ghosts turned into screams of pain and rage. The air of our fear fed their power, as if they were feeding on our emotions. My friend and I realized that we had become part of this nightmarish landscape. The body began to rise slowly into the air, as if it had been lifted by an invisible hand. Blood dripped from him to the floor, leaving a bloody trail. My friend's heart and my heart beat in unison with the steps of our nightmare, which was becoming more and more real. Everything around us began to distort, as if reality began to blur under the influence of this unknown force. The walls of the hospital began to sway slowly, as if they were breathing their own pain. Our consciousness began to mix with the nightmare, and we could not separate reality from illusion. The sounds of the ghosts became louder, as if they were inside us, bursting out through every sometimes forgotten fear. My friend and I tried to cover our ears, but their screams and screams penetrated inside our heads, as if bursting into the very depths of our souls. We ran through the corridors, which began to change their shape, as if they were leading us into a trap. My friend's eyes and mine met, and we realized that our disbelief and frivolity had brought us here. Every step we took deepened us into this nightmare, from which there was no way out. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of us, a dark silhouette, as if it had escaped from the most terrible dreams. We became silent, feeling the horror that this being inspired. His eyes sparkled with an ominous light, and the inner fear of our consciousness responded to this frosty look. The dark figure began to slowly approach us, as if attracting our souls with a magnet. The winds began to howl, emanating from this figure like the cold breath of death. My friend and I realized that our nightmare had become a real nightmare of the ghosts themselves, and we ourselves became pawns in their insidious game. My heart was pounding in unison with this nightmare, and we felt how our emotions and fears became food for these obscurantists. With each step, the figure was getting closer, and we realized that our time was exhausted. Like a sacrifice on an altar, we raised our eyes to this dark creature, ready to accept our fate. Suddenly, a piercing scream rang out from the darkness, and the dark figure suddenly stopped. We took a deep breath, as if it was the only sound that could reach our ears. A deafening noise tore through the air, and we began to feel a strange flutter around us. There, in the shadows, something was moving. Another figure appeared in front of us, a man, badly wounded, bleeding. His every step was a difficult test, and his face was distorted with fear and pain. He was rapidly approaching us, as if seeking refuge from something invisible. My friend and I exchanged looks full of surprise and horror. We realized that this is not an ordinary manifestation of the dark forces. This man was alive, and his fear was real. We approached him, trying to help, but his eyes expressed something more than physical pain. Suddenly our inner fear found a voice. The phone in my friend's pocket rustled, and the bell cut through the air, filling it with even more disturbing rustle. He picked up the phone and tried to make out the words from the distorted sound. The voice on the other end of the line was quiet and ominous, as if it came from the dark corners of a nightmare. You shouldn't have come here. All your actions have led to this moment. Now you have become a part of this tragedy. The voice trembled, as if the words carried something inexpressible. My friend tried to ask a question, but the voice only increased its whisper, as if laughing at our efforts. The man, wounded, was still standing in front of us, his eyes filled with despair. He tried to say something, but only incoherent words and moans of pain came out of his mouth. And so, when we rushed forward, fighting the dark forces that tried to hold us back, the noises and screams became louder, and visions of nightmares began to appear around us, as if an unknown entity was trying to hold us back. We struggled with these illusions, and our steps told us to move forward. Finally, we got out of the dark corridors of this hospital, all exhausted and with many wounds, and my heart was beating because I couldn't tell this story to anyone. But you are my viewers. I hope for your support, and so, I invite you, dear viewers, to subscribe to the Mr. Scary Stories channel, where you will find fascinating stories about fears and nightmares. Immerse yourself in the world of mysterious events and unusual phenomena, and let every story like this be a reminder that our world is full of secrets and dark corners that we need to explore and understand. Don't be afraid, go ahead, and maybe one day you yourself will encounter something that will change your idea of reality.